So I was coming home from work yesterday, and I get this message from my wife. Please be nice to Laura. She didn't get into Wellesley and is devastated. Please be supportive and not be an asshole.
Subtle.
Evidently my wife thinks I'm an asshole. Well, last week when I gave my presentation, some of you were in shock. And one of those people, my good friend and debating partner, the paragon of virtue, Mr. Comrade Jim Como, a couple minutes later decided to throw his chair halfway across the room and announce to all of us that if anyone had the audacity to ever say a prayer again in one of these meetings, that he would hobble out as fast as his cane would allow him. So evidently, he thinks I'm an asshole too. But then, I went ahead and read some of the remarks that I had received. And most of the remarks were along the lines of TMI, or way, way, way too long, Eric. Pretty much like, just shut up and be done already. So I figured out, maybe some of you think I'm an asshole too. So I'm at the point where I'm not going to deny it anymore. Why keep it in? I might as well embrace my inner self and just embrace that inner ass-wholesomeness. So here I go. What do you think, guys? Does this suit me? All right.
Let's see.
It says, Trump, make America great again. Many of you have seen recently that the Mueller report finally came out after 2.5 years of lacerating our president, of giving him a legal colonoscopy, of looking into every single thing in his life and ripping it here, there, and everywhere. And it came out and said there was no Russian collusion. And some of the Republicans have been saying, yes, yes, we knew it all along, we had faith, and finally we've been vindicated, he's been absolved, there's total exoneration. But what they're missing is that there was Russian collusion. It just wasn't with our president. It was with Hillary Clinton. There is a book out there which all of you should rush out and buy right now. It is called Clinton's Cash by Peter Schweizer. Now this gentleman is an equal opportunity hate corruption gentleman. He's had books in which he talks about the corrupt Republicans and what they're doing, but this book is about corrupt Clinton. So everything I'm about to talk about is actually in writing with multiple sources, many of them public, and I'm going to go ahead and pass this around so that you guys can write down exactly how to spell his name and rush on out to order on Amazon this relevant material that everybody needs to have in their library. So, how do I support what I have just said about our previous Secretary of State? I'm glad you asked, I say. I've only got probably about 9 or 10 more minutes, so I'm going to have to rush through this as fast as I possibly can. And that's 3 times longer than Mike ever wants me to speak again. So let's rush right into this. Here are the Clintons up in this corner. Here's Nur Sultan Nazarbayev in this corner. Here's Frank Gustra. And here's Vlad Putin. If those of you don't know, he's a Russian. He's the, quote, president of Russia. He's really a dictator similar to Nursultan Nazarbayev. Now what's interesting about Nursultan Nazarbayev is he's a dictator in Kazakhstan. Can everybody see this, by the way? Do I need to adjust
No.
this? This is important stuff. I don't want you to miss any of it, and I don't want to stand in your way. What's interesting about these dictators, which is similar to Vladimir Putin, is they all win elections by 90% margins. And people who don't like that end up getting tortured or jailed, or they end up having arson to their re-election campaigns. And there's actually human trafficking going on. You can always find plenty of poor women who are being trafficked there. So Clinton goes on September 6th, this is Bill Clinton, September 6th, 2005, and has a meeting with this real bad dude over in Kazakhstan. And what he says is, you know what? I have a friend, Frank Gustra, who wants to have a uranium mining concession in your country. And we don't want you to nationalize it and steal it like you've done to other Canadian companies, like the Third World normally does to most European companies who try and do business. We want you to keep your hands off. And what Nursultan says is, well, that's fine. I'll let him have 30 to 70% of 2 uranium mines, but I and my fellow comrades get the rest of it. So we're all going to bilk our country together. I'm going to get rich, you can get rich, and I'm sure we'll all be happy with this type of thing. And I won't have to nationalize it because you're going to invest all of this money and only get 30% of the profits. So Clinton says, that sounds good to me. And so what happens is Frank Guster gets his 30 to 70% of 2 uranium mines. Now, he doesn't get it personally, he gets it in this entity called Eurasia Energy, which is a private organization. And as a result of him getting it, he gives a bunch of money to an consultant. He only takes 30 to 70% of the investment, and he and his family and his cronies get the difference. But all of a sudden, Frank Guster is making a lot of money. And because he's making a lot of money from this uranium, he gives back to the Clinton Foundation in 2005, only a couple months after this meeting with Bill Clinton, $31.3 million. $31.3 million. There's a reason that Bill Clinton has a $55 million net worth, even though he and his wife have only been paid a couple $100,000 a year since being in office. So the Clinton Foundation is getting all this money, which is just a pass-through to the Clintons. What else does Clinton do for this evil, bad dictator? Well, in 2011, he makes sure, when Hillary is sitting on the Senate Armed Services Committee, that $110 million is given to Kazakhstan in order for weapons of mass destruction, anti-proliferation. $110 million of U.S. taxpayers' money to Kazakhstan. And he talks about how wonderful this dictator is. And he makes sure that the OSCE, which is an Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which is basically a human rights organization. This guy is like the opposite of a human rights hero. But they make sure that he wins the award in 2010. How about that? Okay, so now what else is, in order for Clinton to go back and forth to this meeting, he gets free use of his MD-87 jet provided by Frank Guster that has toilets that are made out of gold plate. I mean, pretty nice stuff. He gets to use it whenever he wants. So what happens then? Eurasia Energy has this huge concession. They're making all of this money. They've given a bunch of it to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has had his wife make sure that additional money is going over here, but eventually this private organization wants to do an IPO, an initial public offering. That's where you make the big bucks. That's when you cash out, and Eurasian Energy turns into Uranium One. So in 2007, Frank Guster owns 60% of Uranium One when he does his big IPO. When he does this big IPO, he pledges $100 million to the Clinton Foundation. $100 million bucks. And how can he do that? Because Vladimir Putin is now going to be buying Uranium One. He's going to be buying it. So that's why I have Uranium One start off here in blue, because it was an organization basically controlled by Frank. And then it becomes this reddish pink thing because that's where Vlad comes in. In 2009, Putin buys 17% of Uranium One. Now, Uranium One controls 50% of the USA uranium market. So there's a bunch of senators and people in Congress who say, hey, is it really a good idea to take our arch enemies, people who've invaded Georgia, people who are supplying nuclear weapons to Iran, is it really a good idea to put them in charge of our uranium reserves? So they say that that's probably a bad idea. So what does Hillary do? Well, Hillary decides that she needs to get approval for this. So she's on the Committee of Foreign Investment in the U.S. This is the committee that normally vetoes this type of stuff. But she, as a Secretary of State under Obama, gets it approved on October 22nd, 2010. Okay? She gets it approved. And in order to do that, she needs the Russian reset. Do you guys remember how excited she was about the Russian reset and she gave big button to the Russians? That was also that she could do this, so that she could get the $100 million. On January 2011, the Russian reset also required a 123 agreement for nuclear cooperation. She made sure that happened too. You know, selling influence for money, isn't that collusion? Isn't that what we've been trying to get Trump for the last 2 years? And yet the evidence that it's happening is right here. Well, Vladimir doesn't want to have this happen unless he can corrupt the people who are doing it. So he makes sure that $500,000 is paid to Bill on June 2010 in Moscow. In Moscow, Bill goes to Moscow and has a speech and makes $500,000 from RENCAP. RENCAP is run by former KGB agents and is an alter ego of Vladimir Putin. But that's not enough. $2.6 million is paid by Solida between 2010 and 2012 directly to Bill Clinton. Solida Capital is a Russian stock agency, also working for Rosatom, which is a nuclear agency, all under Vladimir Putin's control. So they want to make sure Bill owes them something. And boy, does he deliver. Bill and Hillary deliver and allow Vlad to increase from 17% to 52% to 100% ownership of Uranium One. So now the Russians own 50% of Americans' uranium reserves. Bill Clinton has made $145 million. And another $45 million is paid by other people who got rich when Uranium One had their IPO. Now I have one other person that you guys might remember here. Do you guys remember Mark Rich on the last day that Clinton was in office? He pardoned this guy. Well, Mark Rich is the broker who made all of this stuff happen. He was on the FBI's most wanted list. He had a 325-year prison term. He owed $45 billion in back taxes. $45 billion. Actually, $48 billion. And he got pardoned so that he's never going to jail again. He was the broker for this whole thing. And in addition, in 2001, he gave $450,000 to the Clintons, to the Clinton Library, $100,000 to Hillary's Senate race, and $1 million to the Democratic Party. If you guys want corruption, you want collusion, having to do with Russia, it's right here. But Hillary knew that she could be taken down for all of this, so she did what any smart person would do, accuse the other person of exactly what she's guilty of. And she has had us running in circles for 2 years investigating the wrong person, and no one has any stomach or any patience to focus on the person who is actually at fault and do their jobs and put this person in jail. And that, gentlemen, is what happens. And unfortunately, anyone who tries to point this out is just labeled an asshole. Fellow Toastmaster.